Hello, everybody. Eric here with a special video. I was tagged by Kayleigh Dobbs of Happy Goat Horror to take part in this book tag thing. I don't really know how this stuff works, but it's all about being a book snob. And so I have written down the 11. It's kind of 12 questions, but we'll get to that. Written down all the questions that I'm supposed to answer. I watched Kayleigh's video and just would pause so I could write down the questions really quickly. And yeah, so let's see what I have to say about book snobbery. And the first question is, what is your definition of book snobbery? And I would answer that. I'm going to answer that. Basically, it's anyone who looks down on a genre of fiction, a genre of literature, a genre of book, however you would put it. And I believe this is all, nothing specifically said fiction, but I believe that's what we're talking about is fiction. So, because I could say people that read nonfiction who look down on people that read fiction is book snobbery, of course. But this is, again, I think we're generally supposed to be talking about fiction. So, yeah, anyone who looks down on a genre is a book snob. I mean, this is a movie example, but on Facebook, one of my sister's friends, this is a while ago, my sister had mentioned some horror movie, and one of her friends was, I don't waste my time with horror movies. Which there's not liking a genre, and then there's thinking that a genre is trash. It's two different things. So if you look down on anything in books, then I think that makes you a snob. That's a book snobbery. Question number 2. Is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? Short answer is no. Regular viewers will know I'm not a fan of romance, but I have mentioned if one of my favorite authors wrote a romance novel, I would give it a chance. I would read it. And again, I'm talking essentially, we're talking about adult books. Because a genre or type of book, well, I'm not going to read, I'm not going to go out of my way to read an ABC's book. Although, they have like the ABCs of Cthulhu and that kind of thing, which is fun. And I'm not going out of my way to read young adult stuff. I have Adam Seizure, his Clown in a Cornfield trilogy is marketed as young adult, and I've read all 3 of those. But generally, no, there's no genre or type of book I would never consider reading. But there are types that I'm not that interested in reading. Number 3, does erotica count as literature? Why not? I guess it depends on one's definition of literature, how far they're going to take that. Kayleigh Dobbs talked about this and said that the definition that she was familiar with is essentially, and please forgive me, Kayleigh, if I'm way off base here, but any fiction that has artistic merit. And there's nothing that says erotica can't have artistic merit. You could look at any subgenre of fiction and easily point out books that don't have artistic merit in that subgenre and books that do. And there's nothing that says erotica can't have artistic merit if we're going by that definition of what literature is. So no, nothing wrong with erotica. I actually just recorded a review of Judith Sonnet's short story collection and mentioned that she has written, she has a book called Hot Musket that I'm not sure if it's erotica or softcore porn, but it's at the very least, I believe, erotica. And so far, I think just for the character work alone, Judith Sonnet's writing has merit. So yes, erotica counts as literature. Number 4, is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? No. That's a crazy question. No, it's not better. Reading, in general, reading is good, my opinion. And I am a diverse reader, but not everybody is. Not everybody likes everything or even a lot of things. Kayleigh Dobbs, primarily 99.9% reads horror. Now, this does say classic books. There are classic books in the horror subgenre. Kayleigh Dobbs has read those. But generally, I think when people hear classics, they think like the stuff you're supposed to read in high school. Dickens and Shakespeare and Orwell and that kind of stuff. And nothing wrong with reading that. But I wouldn't say it's better to read that. Reading in general, I think, is a good thing. So it would be funny if I just, at least funny to me, if I just gave like yes and no answers to these things. Is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? No. Move on to the next question. But no, not at all. Number 5. Have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? No, I have not. I have talked about reading classics when other people, and this is going to come around to another question, but I've known other people who were book snobs, looked down on me for reading horror or science fiction or fantasy or mysteries or any of the other many subgenres that I read, comic book novels, novelizations, whatever it might be. And I've said, yeah. And I've also read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Bronte and Orwell and Kafka. And again, I'm leaving out the nonfiction stuff. But I would usually bring that up too. I've read Nietzsche and Plato, all sorts of different stuff. Sun Tzu. But I haven't done it to sound smart. I'm not, oh, well, I've read Dostoevsky. You're reading Stephen King, that hack. I've read the classics of Russian literature, but I haven't read War and Peace, because frankly, Tolstoy didn't thrill me. I liked Dostoevsky more. So I've talked about, I don't feel like it was bragging, talked about reading classics to defend myself. I've not bragged about it to sound smart. Number 6. Do audiobooks count as reading? What about comic books and graphic novels? Now, I've always said that technically listening to an audiobook is not reading because you're not reading. Not in any way to say that you haven't consumed the work. Kayleigh Dobbs mentioned, some people don't know if they've listened to a book, if they should put it on the list of books they've read or put it on Goodreads that they read that book. And I don't see any problem with that. But I always would say you didn't technically read it. You weren't an active participant. You were more passive. But Kayleigh did bring something up. She talked about in academia, reading the text isn't just reading words. It might be watching a TV show or watching a play or listening to music, and you would be told to read the text, which meant to consume that show, contextualize it, analyze it, whatever it is you need to do for the class. And by that definition, then absolutely Listening to an audiobook is reading. And as far as comic books and graphic novels, if you know me, you know I'm going to count this as reading, because I've read a lot of comic books. I do like that they have comic books and graphic novels. This is maybe a bit of my snobbery. It's definitely, I would say, pedantic, but comic books, graphic novels, and collected editions are three different things. People tend to just say graphic novel, and I think it started because people didn't want to say, "Oh, I've read this comic book," or TV shows executives didn't want to say this is based on a comic book, so they would say it's based on a graphic novel. It makes it sound better, but a comic book is essentially the floppies that you buy for, well, now $3, $4, $5, however much, generally $4 or $5 an issue. Ay caramba, I remember paying 25 cents when I was a kid. But that's a comic book. A graphic novel was a square-bound, one-shot story. Not sure what the very first graphic novel was. I believe Marvel's first graphic novel was The Death of Captain Marvel. Could be wrong about that. But it was a single story, self-contained, again, square bound. Sometimes they're sort of premium editions. And so, like, Marvel had a graphic novel line. And this is way back when it was basically just Marvel and DC. And you had Archie Comics and a few other little things. But even this was before Dark Horse or Image or any of that. Which, speaking of Image, I think The Walking Dead is one of those things that says, I'm not 100% sure, because I haven't watched The Walking Dead in ages, but people will say, based on the graphic novel, The Walking Dead. No, it's a comic book. And then Collected Edition is a book that collects a bunch of comic books together in one space. So you have omnibus collections, where in this case I'm looking right at my Godzilla, the original Marvel Years omnibus, collects the entire 24-issue run of Godzilla from Marvel in the 70s. Or there's multiple volumes. I believe I have 4 volumes of Master of Kung Fu / Shang-Chi. All of that. And then basically most modern comic books collect the runs. If it's a mini-series, generally going to be collected in one edition. If it's an ongoing series, then you're going to get the first 5 or 6 issues, basically the first story arc, in volume 1, and then the next story arc is going to be in volume 2, etc. But comic books, graphic novels, collected editions, 3 different things. This might be the longest I've talked about any subject during this video, and yes, perhaps a little snobby, definitely pedantic, but I liked that they made that 2 different things, comic books and graphic novels. And as far as whether or not it counts as reading or even literature, Pulitzer Prize winning Maus, M-A-U-S, by, I believe it's Art Spiegelman. It's about Germany, World War II concentration camps. I believe Spiegelman's parents lived through it. But it's the Germans are cats, the Jews are mice, but it's absolutely literature, no question about it. And it won a Pulitzer Prize, if I'm not mistaken. I know it won a prize. I believe it's the Pulitzer. So anyway, let's move on. Number 7. Have you ever looked down on someone for reading a popular fluff book, and then in parentheses, memoir or self-help? No, I haven't. Although I don't know that I've ever read what one might consider a self-help book, unless you count something like the Tao Te Ching. Um, but I've never read like how to win friends and influence people, or how to do this better, or how to be a better this or that. Um, why would I look down on someone for reading that? And I've read plenty of memoirs uh, and autobiographies, and they're, you know, I'm interested in that person and what they have to say and what they may have gone through, what their experiences are. Uh, Looking down on someone for reading a popular fluff book that would be the height of snobbery, in my opinion. And if it weren't for those brackets, popular fluff book for me would also include like, fluff, but James Patterson, Colleen Hoover, airport novels, as they're often called. Although, I mean, you're going to find Stephen King, which I don't think is fluff. Again, is that snobbery? But no, I'm not going to look down on someone for reading popular fluff books. So, number 8. Have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? Absolutely. And talking books, there was a guy I worked with at my last job who was a troll. No qualifiers. The dude was absolutely a troll. This was a person who told me that he watched the first episode of Game of Thrones so that he would have enough knowledge to make fun of all the people who liked Game of Thrones online. But he ended up liking it. He watched the entire series. One of his favorite TV shows. But straight up said, oh yeah, I only watched it so that I could make fun of the people who liked it. And he looks down on, basically doesn't really read fiction. He would keep talking about reading Game of Thrones, but as far as I know, at least to the point where I was still working at Norlake last year, had never read any of them. Don't know that he ever talked about reading fiction. It was all either school books. He went to school, so he'd read his school books, or how-to books, or science books. Which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But if you're reading science fiction, horror, or comic books, that's trash. That was his opinion. So, yes, I've absolutely been the recipient of someone else's snobbery. Number 9, would you ever be friends with a snob? Well, I only have like 2 friends in the world. Maybe 3. But, I mean, yeah, I guess it depends on their level. I don't know why Alexa is talking to me now. I guess it would depend on their level of snobbery, how much they wore it on their sleeve. I would certainly argue with them. And again, we're talking books, I suppose. So, if it's something they kept bringing up, I would absolutely fight back. But I don't think, just being a book snob isn't necessarily a reason to not be friends with people. Oh, and going back to, have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? I've mentioned this before. Regular viewers will probably have heard this. I once dated a young woman who told me only stupid people read. So there you go. That seems like snobbery. Number 10. Are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? Again, short answer, no. I do think that reading is beneficial, even if you're reading fiction, genre fiction, not just literature, not just Shakespeare and that sort of thing. Apparently, I keep seeing things about studies that show people who read fiction are more empathetic than those who don't, because we're immersing ourselves in the lives of people who are different than us, generally speaking. They're probably readers who only read things where they see themselves reflected, but um, just in general, I think reading is a good thing, and um, there are plenty of benefits to reading, but people who don't read being less sophisticated, I don't think so. It's a weird question anyway, sophisticated. Um, I might have worded it, well, this might be a different question. Instead, I would have changed it to, are people who read better than people who don't? That's absolutely a snobby question. But sophisticated seems like a weird way to put it. What is sophisticated? What makes one sophisticated? I love running around in my bare feet. As soon as I get home from work, those shoes and socks are coming off. And if it's once it's even close to being warm enough, when I go outside, I'm in my bare feet. Some would say that's not sophisticated, but and maybe it's not. Who's to say? Whomst among us can say what is or isn't sophisticated? But people who read less sophisticated than people who do, no, I absolutely disagree with that. I do wish there were more people around me who read things that we could discuss. The whole reason I started this channel is because I didn't have anybody to talk about the books or talk to about the books that I was reading. But I'm fine. The people at work don't read, so I went from one place where nobody read anything, so I couldn't talk to anybody about books there, to another place where at least the people that I work with don't really read, so can't talk about books with those people. What are you gonna do? Question 11: Would I qualify as a book snob? I don't think so. My snobbiest opinion would be Kayleigh Dobbs mentions a few times 50 Shades of Grey. She mentioned it during the erotica question and one of the other ones. But I have nothing against 50 Shades of Grey in concept. If you want to read some BDSM, light, very light, and apparently not very representative BDSM erotica, that's fine. I got nothing against that. A lot of the books I read are filled with sex. Maybe not a lot, but I have plenty of books that are filled with sex. But my problem with 50 Shades of Grey is I have not read the books, but I have read excerpts from the books, paragraphs, pages, and terribly, terribly written. Horribly written. So I suppose I'm a little snobby in looking at people that think that's good writing. It's not good writing. It's objectively not well written. And I wish people, and I suppose if it's a what's the word I'm looking for? Like with drugs. I can't think of the word. I'm getting way too old. But if it's the book that gets people hooked on reading and they move on to better written things, no matter the subgenre, I don't want people to think that those are well written books. Not the content. I have no problem with the content or any of that, generally speaking, but I do think they're horribly written and that it saddens me that people think there are people that think they're well written and haven't moved beyond that. Um, so, but that's, I think, as much as a book snob as I am. I'm not interested in reading romance, generally speaking, but I'm not looking down on someone for reading romance. I don't necessarily get the appeal, but people don't get the appeal of reading horror, especially extreme horror, and I love that stuff. Um, but and I suppose when I talk about being uh, having a wide variety of interests in reading, I suppose that could sound snobby. Oh, I don't just read horror. I also read mysteries and thrillers and science fiction and fantasy. And again, I'm leaving out nonfiction. Um, and I read classics. I suppose that could come off as snobby. Let me know. Does that sound snobby? Oh, I don't just stick to this one thing. I'm well rounded. I'm a well rounded individual. I'm also surrounded by comic book stuff. How snobby can I be? Um, and then the twelfth thing on the list was to tag somebody. But the only person I would have tagged would be Kayleigh Dobbs, and she's the one who tagged me. Excuse me. So that's it. That's the book snob video. I feel like there's things I forgot to talk about while I was watching Kayleigh's video, jotting down the questions and listening to her answers. Things popped into my head that I wanted to say, and then now that I've recorded, I feel like I've forgotten some of those things. But there you have it. Let me know what you think. Do I seem like a book snob? What are your thoughts on book snobbery? Feel free to answer any of these questions. Let me know if I didn't actually answer. Did I skirt any questions? Did I sidestep? Did I tango around? Let me know. And feel free to ask your own questions. All of that in the comments below. And I guess this is where I would say if you have any comments, questions, or corrections. But that's essentially what I just said. So please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, I'll have links for my Instagram and Bluesky in the description below. And that's it. That's all I've got for this video. So until next time, read more of whatever kind of books you want to read.